former President Trump. Let me just ask you this quite simply. Why haven't you endorsed him yet?
Well, the campaign is still going. There's a very good chance I would endorse
He's the clear
Trump.
front runner.
You know
He's
what?
the clear front runner. What are you waiting for?
Well, I believe... Well, you know what? Because I've got a southern border wide open. I got war in the Middle East. I got things I'm focused on right now. I believe President Trump will be our nominee, and I believe President Trump will get reelected.
Are you still a MAGA Republican, Mr. Speaker?
He has brought it chaos. You know what? I am a conservative Republican from the beginning to the end, and that's what I've always been. You can try to phrase different names to people, but I'm proud of who I am.
Do you think Tom Emmer will actually be able to get enough votes to be Speaker? Because all of my reporting suggests it's an uphill battle.
I do.
All right, guys, so you know what time it is. The GOP still does not have a Speaker for the House designee. So now we're back to square one, and we're going to continue with our soap opera of trying to figure out who is going to be the next GOP Speaker of the House nominee after Jim Jordan was stabbed in the back by the GOP traitors after his run for Speaker of the House. Now, this time around, we have about 9 people, 9 Republicans that have thrown their hat in the arena to become the next Speaker of the House. But first, again, they have to become the GOP designee in order to go to the floor and to have a vote among Democrats and Republicans for who wants to be the Speaker of the House. Now, we're only going to talk about 2 of those candidates in this video, and the reason why is because just like you guys observed, or you should have observed over the past few weeks when it comes to Speaker drama, there is the candidate that the establishment wants, and then there's the candidate that the people want. Most of the time, the people don't get who they want because the Republicans, a lot of times, don't vote in the direction that the conservative base wants them to vote in, right? And we witnessed that when it came to the campaign to be Speaker from Jim Jordan. Now, the first guy we got to talk about is the establishment's pick. He is Tom Emmer. Now, Tom Emmer is a representative from Minnesota, and he is the front runner because he is the majority whip. He is third in line in regards to Republicans in power in the House. So Kevin McCarthy got ousted. He's number 1. Steve Scalise was number 2. His campaign didn't go well to become Speaker. And now you have Tom Emmer. He's up next, right? So we're going to talk about him. And then the next guy is probably the conservative basis pick to be Speaker, which is Byron Donalds. Okay, Byron Donalds is from Florida. He's a part of the Freedom Caucus. He's a favorite among the conservative base because he is a strong conservative. In fact, if you look at his Liberty score, he has 100%. He has an A, okay, which means that he votes 100% conservative and 0% liberal. Okay, there's nothing liberal about this guy, right? Which, would be hard to believe if you are a Democrat who believes that, all black people are liberal and it's impossible for them to be conservative Republicans. But this guy has been a Freedom Caucus guy. He's been a hardcore conservative from the beginning. Okay, so it also doesn't hurt him as well, too, that when he goes on the mainstream liberal media, outlets like CNN, he destroys and trashes them every single time.
Even if you listen to the last segment with Jake, everything that was just talked about is not on the minds of independent voters in America. They are focused on the things that are affecting their families. First and foremost, has my child actually caught up from being locked out of schools for 2 years? Is fentanyl, which is a major issue in so many communities around our country, is the president going to do the job of securing our border and stopping the drug cartels from having operational control of our southern border? Are we going to maintain the dollar as the world's reserve currency while China's trying to negotiate around the United States? Inflation, yes, the year-over-year number is trending down, but the impact of inflation on the American family has completely devalued their wages over the last 2 years. Those are the things that really matter to Americans.
Yeah, so you seen that, you heard that. Now, I think that Byron Donalds, when it comes to being able to articulate the conservative agenda, I think that he's probably the best Republican that I've heard in Congress. Okay, I think he's right up there with Vivek Ramaswamy, who I also think is very good at articulating the conservative agenda and selling it. And in my opinion, I think that that's a big deal, right? I think that's a big deal because one thing Republicans need to do a lot better is to sell legislation, sell the fact that they have solutions to America's problems to the public, the same way that Democrats do, right? And speaking of Democrats, you have one of the main pushers of the Green New Deal, which is a household name. I mean, Democrats have brainwashed kids into knowing what the Green New Deal is, right? AOC, she is taking issue with Byron Donalds announcing his run for Speaker of the House because, according to her, she's a former bartender, by the way, he lacks the experience to be Speaker of the House. Take a look.
So you mentioned your colleagues in the Congress. Before we run out of time, I've got to ask you about the House itself. You have no speaker right now. The Republicans defenestrated Kevin McCarthy, couldn't agree on Steve Scalise or Jim Jordan. Now Byron Donalds, congressman from Florida, wants to be speaker. What do you make of him?
He's only served one term in the U.S. House of Representatives. Last thing that he did in an oversight committee was attempt to submit falsified evidence to an impeachment hearing. I think it helps to know where all the bathrooms are before you run for the U.S. House of Representatives personally. And I think it helps to have some real experience in one of the most complex legislative bodies in the world before you try to run it.
Yeah, so what's hilarious about this, right, is AOC is talking all this smack. But like I said on X, what has AOC done while in Congress besides cry, right? I literally can't think of anything that AOC has done, okay? I mean, if you look at her background before coming into Congress, she was a bartender versus somebody like Byron Donalds who worked in the financial services industry, okay? He was a credit analyst. He was a financial advisor. Clearly, when it comes to qualifications to legislate and to be in Congress, I would imagine that Byron Donalds probably has more knowledge about the economy, about the country in general, than AOC does from his professional career. Not only that, AOC is ranked among the most least effective members of Congress, period. Her and the squad are totally ineffective. In fact, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez ranked 230th out of 240 Democrats in the 116th Congress. She sponsored only 21 bills, according to the analysis, which disregards symbolic legislation like House resolutions. Yeah, so AOC, who was a former bartender, by the way, and one of the most least effective members of Congress, is criticizing Byron Donalds for not having enough experience to be Speaker of the House. This is hilarious to me, right? Because she's accomplished absolutely nothing. She couldn't even force the vote, right? This is what progressives literally elected people like AOC to go to Congress to, quote unquote, force the vote, right? Just force a vote on Medicare for all, and she couldn't even do that, right? She couldn't even do that. Meanwhile, you have House Freedom Caucus members like Byron Donalds, who's very respected, having a serious run for Speaker of the House. He will get some votes. Okay, he will get support, right? He has made more of a name for himself. He's accomplished more. You have people like Matt Gaetz that forced Kevin McCarthy out of the speaker seat in the first place. And what has AOC done for the people that that voted her in office? Again, absolutely nothing. They've got nothing out of her, right? She's too busy cozying up to Mama Bear Pelosi for money. So with that being said, I want to play this clip here from Fox News of them interviewing Byron Donalds and him talking about what he's going to do or his goals as speaker. And one of the promises he's making that Kevin McCarthy didn't keep, which is to release all the January 6th footage. So let's go ahead and get into it.
Tuesday, GOP Congressman Byron Donalds joins us next. Congressman, thanks for joining us this morning. So what is your pitch to the GOP conference? What are your priorities?
My pitch is very simple. First, we got to get back to work immediately. We have to get these appropriation bills done. we must secure our border. If we're going to continue government funding, the border must be secured, and the White House has to realize that and take us seriously. Number two, we have a true ability to expand our majorities past this Congress. We can do that with strong, direct leadership where the White House knows where we stand, the American people see the strategies and the work that the Republican majority is trying to get done. I totally believe that. And number three, we can have unity in our conference. It's going to start with a fresh voice in leadership, working with all of our colleagues to accomplish the mission that our voters sent here to do.
You know, this is why I like Byron Donalds, right? And I'm going to tell you the reason why I like him. Because most of these Republicans, I guarantee you, a vast majority of them have made it obvious that their issue with Jim Jordan was, well, we don't know if he's going to fund Ukraine, right? Or if he's going to send money overseas to fight other people's wars. Now, Jim Jordan, when he talked about his speakership bid, one of the first things that came out of his mouth was sending money overseas to fight other people's wars, not Ukraine, but Israel. Now, here's the thing. I definitely think that Israel has the right to defend themselves, and I think that the United States should be supportive defensively of Israel, to be more specific, right? But that's not the first thing I want to hear, right? The first thing I want to hear when you talk about the Speaker of the House is America's priorities. And that's what I'm hearing from Byron Donalds. The first thing that came out of Byron Donalds' mouth was secure the border. The second thing that came out of his mouth was expand the majority. The third thing that came out of his mouth was unity among the conference. I think he's right when it comes to the top priorities, right? I mean, you're talking about protecting our own border first before talking about protecting somebody else's border. That's more what I want to hear from Republicans. And this is why I think that, Byron Donalds, if not today, one day he will definitely be the right guy.
Byron, I'm concerned. You talk about the border. We just did a story on it. It's frightening, the number of known terrorists. We went from 0 known terrorists captured under Donald Trump to now record numbers. We're in over 160. That doesn't count the 50,000 Chinese who have come across the border just in the last year. This is really scary. And we have this bill coming up, that Biden has put forward where, he has money dedicated to the border, but I feel like that's just for enforcement. What can Congress do to make sure, it's for processing versus enforcement. What can Congress do to make sure it's used to protect our border and enforce security there versus just using it to process more people?
Well, let me be very clear. We don't have a money problem with respect to the southern border. We have a policy problem. The policies were put in place by Joe Biden when he became president of the United States. Those policies have to be reversed. House Republicans have supported the strongest border security package that has ever passed the House of Representatives in H.R. 2. The elements of H.R. 2, frankly, all of it should be implemented immediately by the White House. They can do this tomorrow. So if the White House is going to come and say they want more money, then we're going to say, no, you need to change your policies, because the American people want to be supportive around the globe. We are going to be supportive of Israel, but we must secure our border. It must occur, and it needs to happen immediately.
So again, what you hear here is Byron Donalds doing something again that I've advocated for a long time. Republicans need to talk about the legislation that they have. He just brought it up, H.R. 2, when it comes to securing the border. He's saying, look, we can't just give Biden money for more processing when he's not actually trying to secure the border, right? AKA not let people in, right? We already have legislation that solves the border problem. They just need to pass it, right? They just need to sign off on it. This is what the next Speaker of the House should be doing. Okay, they should be putting massive pressure while the polls are in our favor. The polls are massively in our favor when it comes to the border, the economy. Republicans need to be pushing legislation to secure the border and to reduce inflation, to reduce our national debt. And I'm not going to sit here and say that, oh, no, we shouldn't do that because Democrats have the majority in the Senate and Biden would never sign it. We shouldn't push it as hard as we can. No, we should be. Because just because they have the majority in the Senate and the White House, the American people agree with us. Okay, they overwhelmingly agree that they want the conservative solution. So while you have the leverage with the people, you need to maximize that leverage and let the people know that, hey, the only thing that's standing between lower costs, right, lower costs and reducing the debt and a secure border is the Biden administration. Pressure them to take up Republican legislation. That is what we need to hear more of from these Republicans. I'm so serious.
What's your position on more money for Ukraine?
My position is that we have to change a number of things. Number one, we need an inspector general over there actually accounting for those dollars. Number two, the White House needs to actually have a strategy for us. And what's the purpose and what's the end goal of all of this? All of that has not been clear. And here's the biggest one, Rachel. This money has to be paid for. The White House wants $60 billion. Meanwhile, one of the key elements of their plan with respect to the Green New Deal, estimates are it's going to cost the American people $1 to $2 trillion. We have to pay for this money. We can't just send it out without any ability to take care of the purse strings of the American people. And we need to make sure that's done.
So are you suggesting the money go out to Ukraine, but that we maybe take it away from what was allocated for the Green New Deal? Or are you saying Ukraine has enough money?
What I'm saying is two things. Number one, we have to evaluate what Ukraine already has. But number two, if the White House is going to say their primary mission now is funding Ukraine, and they need to defund one of their other priorities. We are already $33 trillion in debt. We're running a $2 trillion deficit this year. We cannot continue this because the fiscal health of our nation will be in jeopardy.
Okay. Now, again, this is an interesting answer because, again, one of the things that are going to be in the way in regards to anybody becoming Speaker of the House is going to be the Ukraine funding, because a vast majority of Republicans are going to want the new speaker to support Ukraine funding. I mean, Democrats and Republicans both support it. Now, Byron Donalds here is trying to walk a fine line by saying, look, I don't really support new spending for Ukraine, but we need to evaluate what we've already spent to figure out where that money's going, which I agree with him on that. And then he's also saying something interesting in the sense that, well, if Biden really wants to fund Ukraine, then we need to take away money from other places. So he's not necessarily saying that he wouldn't support continued funding of Ukraine. He's just saying that you need to offset it from other things that the Biden administration is trying to fund, the Biden agenda, okay? Particularly when it comes to the green aspects, which I believe was in the Inflation Reduction Act. I think that's what he's talking about. So, again, this is a very interesting kind of fine line here because, again, the reality is that if you don't support funding for Ukraine or Israel, you ain't going to become speaker, right? And that's just what it is. And it's just interesting to see this answer here because the base doesn't want any funding for Ukraine. But what Byron Donalds is saying, he's trying to get that middle ground and say, well, we don't need any new funding. If you're going to send funds over there, you got to defund the Green New Deal or defund the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a fascinating kind of middle ground because he has a very strong record of voting against more funding for Ukraine. Okay, so it's interesting. It's going to be fascinating to see him try to square that circle.
Okay, I have a couple questions. So really quick one on this. If you become speaker, will you release all of the January 6th footage? I will, absolutely. Okay.
Yeah, so again, that's a big deal, right? And the reason why is because Kevin McCarthy, one of the reasons why conservatives are so upset with him is because he didn't fulfill that promise, right? He didn't fulfill that promise of releasing all the January 6th footage. And if Byron Donalds does that, then I think that will automatically make people trust him more. Now, again, I'm not sure if he will actually do it, but this is what he's saying. So now we got to move on to, again, his competition, Tom Emmer, who has a much lower Liberty score than Byron Donalds at 69%, which, could help him, right? Actually helps him among, the modern day Republican Party, which they tend to like guys like this, right? That don't vote conservative as often as people would like them to do so. Okay, so they like this guy, right? And, hey, he could be the guy just simply because he doesn't vote as conservative as Byron Donalds. But what a lot of people are not going to like is this guy's position on the popular vote, because this guy wants to have a national popular vote implemented where you replace the Electoral College and you make states vote with whoever wins the national popular vote, which we know would basically be the end of the Republican Party, considering how they haven't won a national vote in a presidential election in forever.
And the first misconception about national popular vote is that this proposal is somehow going against what the founding fathers intended or against the very language of the Constitution. And it is a misconception. What national popular vote provides is that each state is allowed to determine how to award its electors. This proposal would allow the state of Pennsylvania and my state of Minnesota to say, we are going to award our electors to the candidate for president that gets the highest number of popular votes across the country. Article 2, Section 1. It is constitutional. We're not changing the Constitution. If you respect states' rights, if you truly do believe in them, then you respect the states' rights to determine however they want to award their electors. I've had the argument made to me, Tom, as a conservative, why would you ever want to support something like national popular vote? All they'd have to do is focus their campaigns on the large urban centers. Last time I checked, the top 50 cities in this country, most populated, dense urban areas, make up less than 20% of the popular vote. And
yeah, so this guy is basically advocating for his own state of Minnesota to be forced to have their electors go towards a candidate they didn't vote for because, I don't know, the rest of the liberals in this country said that, hey, you know, we want the other guy, right? So again, if the whole country votes for Biden and his state votes for Trump, this guy is advocating for his state to say, no, we want our votes to go to Biden, despite the fact that his state said, no, we want to vote for Trump. Again, this is the guy that probably will get the most votes, right? Or at least on the first round, we will see. But it doesn't help him that, one, he's for that. And then two, allegedly behind closed doors, Trump is telling allies he doesn't support Tom Emmer's speaker bid, which is a big deal because if Trump doesn't support the guy for speaker, then that means that he's going to have a hard time getting the votes from, you know, Republicans in the House who actually are aligned with Trump. Okay, so apparently Tom Emmer has been having conversations with Trump, but Trump don't really like the guy, right? And they want to see a MAGA speaker, right? They don't want to see an old school establishment Republican be speaker. So again, you know, Trump is not necessarily all that fond of this guy. Now, we will see how that plays into the speaker vote. But, you know, regardless, I think that we can all kind of agree that it's probably going to be another, you know, round of chaos. I think that Byron Donalds has an outside shot at getting it, right? It would be kind of hilarious to see him get it because Democrats would melt down, not just because he's super conservative, but also because he's black. And that would take away Hakeem Jeffries' hopes and dreams of becoming the first black Speaker of the House. It would be funny to see that happen. But regardless, it's still going to be probably pretty chaotic, and I don't expect them to actually come together anytime soon to decide a speaker, which, you know, hey, in my opinion, is not necessarily a bad thing considering how all these politicians, they want to rush to just give money overseas anyways. So it's probably a good thing for them to take their time, right, with this speaker vote. That way nothing can get done, which again, sometimes is a good thing. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.